while looking through some Anglo-Saxon sources, I stumbled across what might just be the best place name in history. Now, I know that's a lofty claim, given as there's been millions of places to ever exist, but it's a cool one, okay? And I am welcoming any challenges to my claim down in the comments, because I'm sure there's been some obscure cave or something with some Yu-Gi-Oh card name like the Lair of Despair and Portal to the Underworld or something, but from what I know, from what I have personally heard of, this is number one. So, Alfred the Great once crafted a will to decide which of their great many royal estates should go to their kin, and one of these royal estates was called Thunderfield, or in modern people talk, Thunderfield. Thunderfield. It feels so satisfying and impactful to say, you know? It's a scientific fact that putting thunder at the beginning of a word just automatically makes it sound amazing. And Thunderfield. Sounds like the site of some high fantasy battle or something. Sadly though, there was never a real battle here. I mean, come on Vikings, if you're gonna do all that pillaging in the 9th century when Thunderfield was first recorded, could you have at least given us the Battle of Thunderfield as compensation? You know, give people an impetus to get into the time period, jeez. I say that like people aren't drawn to the axe-wielding, drinking, battle-scarred, Thor-worshipping Vikings setting kingdoms ablaze. Literally. Talking of Thor though, we can now get into why exactly I like this name just so much. What it means. Thunderfield's oldest recorded form contains two elements, Thunrus and Felder. The legend of Felder is just a typical geographic descriptor, meaning field, or more generally any kind of clearing, like a common. Nothing flashy, but nice to know. Thunrus, on the other hand, is flashy, being a derivative of the Anglo-Saxon pagan god of lightning, Thunor, the parallel to the Norse pagan god, Thor. This dedication to a pagan god helps us determine an estimated foundation date as well. When the Anglo-Saxons first arrived in Britain, they were pagans, but in the very late 500s the King of Kent converted to Christianity, and by 686 every king had done the same, the religion becoming outlawed. Paganism would technically still exist after the 600s, but it would be relegated to the very fringes of society. Even today they can be seen worshipping their gods around Neolithic megaliths and using their pagan powers to take down YouTube videos. The story arc of the 7th century really was the implementation of Christianity into Anglo-Saxon society, which places the foundation of Thunderfield, this very pagan sounding name, in the barely recorded 5th or 6th centuries, the darkest of the Dark Age. There are no references to Thunderfield back in these pagan days, nor any archaeological evidence for its existence. All we can ascertain is from its name, a pre-Christian origin placed in an open landscape. The rest is left to our imagination. A small settlement of just a few timber buildings, and perhaps a temple in dedication to Thunor somewhere, hidden among the fields of Britain, southern Britain. That it was in the south can be known from its earliest mention in the written record, Alfred's Will, being among a long list of places exclusively within the Kingdom of Wessex. Despite seeing its namesake become heathen heresy in this all-new Christian world, Thunderfield's prominence would only rise through the centuries, finding itself a royal estate in the 880s. A royal estate was a small settlement or property like this, directly in possession of royalty, which could be used as a residence, but were primarily important for generating income. Any wealth produced here went directly to the king, instead of through the great filter of the feudal system. In the time of Alfred the Great, there was about 60 of these royal estates according to his will, and all we can surmise about Thunderfield is that it was one, showing a decently high status. and that it was being gifted to Alfred's nephew, Athelhelm. Athelhelm was actually the son of former King Ethelred, who had died during the invasion of the Great Heathen Army, but wasn't elected king due to being a, less than ideal candidate. Instead, Alfred was anointed. It appears this will may have been, in part, an attempt to placate this claimant's risky ambitions of kingship with the guarantee of instead becoming a wealthy landholder, owner of 8 royal estates, including Thunderfield, and a chest full of 100 gold coins. Although, because we are talking about early medieval Europe here, these delicately designed succession plans didn't exactly come to fruition. Ethelhelm was never again recorded in history, falling to like a cold or something, before he could actually inherit anything, and the other nephew, Athelwold, died in a failed bid for the kingship. Although undeniably overshadowed by many other places and people and events of the time, being involved in the machinations of royal power isn't exactly a bad first appearance in history for Thunderfield. Following the deaths of both Athelhelm and Athelwold, Thunderfield appears to have defaulted back into the direct ownership of the king, its importance only growing. Just a couple generations later, Athelstan, first king of the English, chose the site to draw up and ratify an important kingdom-wide law code at Thunderfield. Athelstan was not messing around in these laws, by the way. Thievery had become somewhat rampant by his time, and his solution was pretty simple. If there is a thief who has committed theft since the council was held at Thunderfield, he shall in no way be judged worthy of life, whether it is a freeman or a slave, a noble or a commoner. Oh, what's that? You wanted a slice of bread to feed your family? How about an axe instead? Thank Thunor, we're not born in a time where our leaders' qualifications are being born. Despite this stint of success, directly in possession of the king and one of just 5 places to host England's earliest laws, Thunderfield would suffer a historic drop-off. It never again had any significance, with no event of note occurring there ever again. It went from being mentioned in 2 kings' official documents to essentially making cameo appearances in land grants and stuff. For example, here's a charter supposedly dating to Athelstan's reign in which Thunderfield is in a long list of unremarkable places, almost hidden amongst them, all in possession of Chertsey Abbey. Every single place listed here, bar one, is located within the county of Surrey, whether it be Frimley or Thorpe or Merstham, and so too is Thunderfield. Now, this charter is actually considered a forgery, spurious.
It's false, pure fiction. It's a total fabrication. It's a fake. This one was invented by a writer.
Made up after the Anglo-Saxon period by the dastardly monks of Chertsey Abbey in order to create precedent for their land claims, but it still nevertheless demonstrates the unremarkable documents Thunderfield would appear in. For its actual next appearance after Athelstan's laws, it's one of 20 hides, or units of land, given to Merstham during the reign of Eadred in 947. Again, a cameo appearance in possession of somewhere not even particularly significant. Here's a random reference to a land grant involving Thunderfield in 1273, and so on. When map-making became more commonplace and widespread, Thunderfield made its exact location known, but crucially not initially. The earliest series of maps of Surrey specifically do not include it, showing it wasn't even worth delineating in its own county. However, Thunderfield's exact positioning can be seen thanks to a map named Surrey Actually Surveyed and Delineated, was made in 1679, showing Thunderfield being in the south of the county. This incarnation of Thunderfield was a far cry from its days of royal importance, just an obscure, unremarkable settlement, known only to those near it, like thousands of others across the country. But somehow it went even further beyond into the chasm of obscurity. You may have realised that the spelling of Thunderfield can be inconsistent, with variations like Thunderfield and Thundersfield. But how? Can't they just look up the standard or just look it up on a map or something? Well, that's the thing. No definitive standard exists for Thunderfield because Thunderfield as a place no longer exists. It has become a lost settlement. For centuries, this area surrounding Thunderfield was a landscape of farmlands, fields and forests, dotted with other small communities of agriculturalists and manorial landholders. This world, though, has long made way for a modern landscape, made up of an international airport, the increasingly sprawling Crawley and Hawley, a motorway network, and apparently no room left for Thunderfield. Not only is there no settlement of this ancient estate anymore, there is nothing left, no remnants or echoes of a forgotten place. There are no medieval ruins, no crumbling church, no grove nor common nor hill bearing its name, no archaic civil parish or local government with like zero population. There's not even an honorary street name. Worse still, Thunderfield doesn't even have a legacy. There are no videos on YouTube delving into its past, no websites or Wikipedia article giving a comprehensive breakdown on its story, and no academic paper discussing Thunderfield. It's completely obscure. This place hosted laws to dictate how everyone in England should behave. Now, it's left no physical trace on our earth or our minds. That is, with one controversial exception. Slightly north of where we'd expect Thunderfield to be, a mile east of Hawley town centre, lies the site known as Thunderfield Castle. Despite the epic imagery such an awesome name conjures in the mind, this is a unremarkable site, with no surviving structural remains left to us. Overgrown by foliage, not labelled on most maps, and only accessible by a rural path through farmland and a nondescript, unpaved road, neither of which signpost the officially listed medieval moated site to which they lead. The only way one could have found themselves here is to have somehow heard of some obscure Anglo-Saxon royal estate and sought out what's left. And so... standing here, I realise just how much Thunderfield has been lost to history. To my right, mere metres from me, would have stood a landmark fitting a lord, but you'd never know. Like I said before, there are no signposts leading here, but there's also not even any information boards. The location just feels like any other semi-rural English neighbourhood. There just isn't any indication something of significance is just yards away. In fact, there are only two signs hinting as to what was once here: the nearby Castle Drive and Castle Farm, itself actually inhabiting the same space as Thunderfield Castle. Acting as a metaphor for Thunderfield itself, the castle has been forced to make way for a modern world, now occupied by a dilapidated and presumably abandoned farm / some kind of car business, judging by this sign's license plate look and these rotting vehicles. To further these depressing conditions, the farm, and thus this historic site, is cordoned off by metal fencing, barbed wire and a medieval moat. While this moat can be easily seen from ground level, it cannot be easily distinguished from any other stream or creek, nor can it be easily appreciated unless seen from above. The layout consists of a pretty typical inner moat, creating a central island upon which the site's primary building would have presumably stood, then an adjoining northward extension creating a second island, all enclosed within a third outer moat, since partially destroyed. This is a very intricate design, given its unremarkable status, made clear when comparing it to the region's other moats. Here's an illustration of how Thunderfield Castle may have looked like, although any depiction has to be taken with extreme caution, as we know shockingly little. There has only ever been one small-scale archaeological excavation here, done in the 30s. Frustratingly, the document featuring the results of this excavation appear to just not exist online, although two other places claim they found the results of a bloomery, indicating there was actually activity at the site, but beyond that, nothing can be concretely ascertained about Thunderfield Castle. In spite of this fact, the fact that we know basically nothing, the Harrowsley Local History Society makes an interesting claim, stating that this site is in fact not a castle, nor even originally associated with Thunderfield, and there is actually some weight to this. During the entire medieval era, Thunderfield is not once recorded as having a castle, which is pretty remarkable if it did exist, given the castle's pivotal importance to medieval societies. In fact, the earliest reference to Thunderfield Castle was in the Perambulations of Surrey, written at the earliest in 1673. This remarkably late date for something likely medieval in origin leaves open the possibility that Thunderfield Castle was in fact known by a different name until the early modern era. As it happens, there are at least two references to a manor or court at Harrowsley or Harrowsley. Harrowsley, the settlement that once surrounded Thunderfield Castle. Harrowsley was a tiny settlement, encompassing a small area with just a few buildings and a population almost certainly limited to the double digits. We know that somewhere in this small space was a manor, and right in the middle of this community lies a suspiciously manor-shaped hole. And this does line up with the local landscape. Rural communities centered around manors. After looking at all of this, I think we know who this Thunderfield Castle really is. But with the discovery that Thunderfield Castle was likely in fact Harrowsley Manor, we are once again left to reconcile with the fact that Thunderfield has left no authentic trace of its existence to us. Sure, some individual fields making up the common can still be seen, but that name, that idea, is lost. Even Harrowsley, the tiny rural settlement it was, even after being subsumed into Harrowsley, gets to survive in the evolved or alternate form Harrowsley, with the original form seen on occasion. Thunderfield, this once much more prestigious place, has nought, except of course this erroneously named castle. Although, how much does the authenticity of that connection even matter? Thunderfield likely started life like thousands of other places across Britain, marked out by a group of Germanic newcomers or their descendants as they attempted to understand and make home of the new land in which they found themselves, named in dedication to one of their glorious gods. Generation after generation would experience most of their lives in and around Thunderfield, and whether that was at its peak as a royal estate hosting law, or an unremarkable lowly settlement, Thunderfield represented those generations of lives. In our modern world though, the only thing continuing that millennia and a half of history and life stands hidden and misidentified, in the shadow of something so perfectly embodying the changing times. And it's only because of that misidentified site that Thunderfield can still be seen making its small impact on our world. It may not be on Google Maps, and Apple Maps seems to think it's been consumed by the void, but here, its name can still be seen on the Ordnance Survey maps. And look, there's a field near the site called Thor's Field, which has recently added Thor's Stables, surely an allusion to Thunderfield's godly etymology. And in case that's in doubt, it could be a coincidence or something, the homestead on this land is called Saxon House. Over 1,000 years since it's been relevant, and Thunderfield is still making an impact on our world. Something entirely impossible if not for this misidentified castle. While this is all lovely, I do think Thunderfield deserves more. For most of its history it's been an obscure rural settlement or common, but it did host some of England's earliest laws, overseen by one of its most successful ever kings. Maybe its last vestige, misidentified or not, shouldn't be a barely identifiable decrepit farm. I'm not asking for much, just put up an information board or an online local council-made article in recognition or a Wikipedia article or something. But on the bright side, at least there is something. So no, I don't think it matters. Thunderfield only survives today in the form of a completely unrelated Harrowsley manor, because the best place name in history gets to live on as a place name.